Welcome back, YouTube. Today I'm going to share with you my 2 favorite exercises for triceps. I'll also bring you here into the gym and show you how to set them up properly and perform them properly, and how to personalize the exercises to yourself, what you have available, and where your strength levels are currently at. One thing I do want to address immediately off the start of this video is one of the most common complaints that I get around triceps training, which is elbow pain. Now, first and foremost, if you ever experience pain on any exercise, it's important to understand that it's a signal to tell you that something is amiss. Whether that's with your exercise selection, the setup of the exercise, the technique when you perform the exercise, or the volume and intensity at which you train the exercise with. Or it could be all of the above as well. You see, when you lay it out like that, that's at least 5 variables that have to be managed. Although there are several more that could easily play into your experience of elbow pain. I can't tell you exactly what you should be doing if you're experiencing pain in the elbows or any part of your body, but one thing that I personally find to be overlooked by people is addressing the most obvious, which is the exercises that they're choosing. So a common mistake that I see people make is they look to do all sorts of different passive therapies like massage, dry needling, soft tissue release, or even going to more active strategies, maybe like with very specific rehabilitation or isolated exercises to try to address their issue. Now, I do think that those things can play a very useful part in somebody's overall treatment plan, but they should also be looking at the most obvious thing in the first place. So this video is not going to be about addressing or fixing elbow pain if you're experiencing it, as there are a lot of factors to consider. But it will include a couple of things to consider with your triceps training to help you maximize the stimulation you place upon your triceps to get the most out of your training, whilst preserving things like your elbows. So stay tuned. Now, we're past the halfway point of this 2 exercise series, and I hope you've been enjoying it so far. I've pulled everything together into a playlist that I'll leave a link to in the description box and pinned comments, so you can jump over and check out all the other body parts in this series so far. While you're there, please do go ahead and give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It really does help this channel grow, which means I can create more content just like this for you. I'd also like to hear from you. What are your favorite 2 exercises for triceps? I'll give you 10 seconds to drop me a comment below to let me know, whilst I take a sip of my tea. 2 sips. So, exercise number 1 is the cable katana extension. Now, you don't have to call these katana extensions. I call it that because to me it looks like the way Deadpool or a ninja would unsheath a katana from the back. Although, if we're being specific here, traditional samurais would actually have their katanas sheathed on their hips and not across their shoulders, across their back. But in any case, I think the name katana extension is a lot more fun than cable overhead triceps extension. So I'm running with it. Now, the big reason I'm such a fan of these is the alignment that it creates for the triceps and the elbow joint. I spoke about this a little bit in a video on biceps that I'll leave a link to up here if you want the extra nerdy detail. But for the crash course, what you need to know is that the human body is actually set up in a way where the ideal path to be extending your elbow joint is going to be in a path that crosses your center line, instead of following a parallel path. How much this is will vary person to person based not just on their mobility levels, which you can potentially change long term, but on their personal structure as well, which is relatively fixed since we're dealing with your bones in this instance. So what happens when you use a traditional cable push down using a fixed bar, whether it's a straight bar or an easy bar, is we're forcing our arms to extend in this parallel fashion. Or if we were to let the elbows flare out, we're going to get a misalignment of the line of force, which is running straight up and down with the force that our muscles are applying going through a diagonal plane of motion. Now, either of these 2 things can lead to excess forces going through the elbows and shoulders at worst, but at best, it puts you into a position that is limiting the output of your triceps and the stimulus they'll wind up receiving. This can be overcome somewhat by simply using a rope, but you just have to make sure that the rope is long enough and set up appropriately to allow you to track along the perfect setup for your structure, which again is surprisingly challenging to find because all ropes are not created equal or readily available. So instead of having to rely on this, the katana extension covers all of your bases. The arm path is set up so that it crosses your midline, allowing natural human mechanics to be maintained. And the cable is aligned appropriately with the arm path, meaning that there is no loss of force output or stimulation from the triceps. You can also set the cable height higher or lower based on your own mobility and structure, and you can even change it side to side if you find that there is a slight difference for you personally with your mobility or your range of motion or your position side to side. Now, I'm personally doing this with one arm, but there is no reason why you couldn't do this with both arms at the same time, depending on what you have available and the comfort of setup. I will say that it is a little tricky to get in and out of position when you use both arms at the same time, so hopefully you're coordinated enough to nail the dismount once you hit that failure point or the end of your set. So that's exercise number 1. Let's take a look now at exercise number 2. Dips. Dips are a pretty advanced exercise, and this could also be replaced maybe with something like close grip push-ups or even maybe a close grip bench press variation. I like to do them on gymnastic rings because it allows for that customization to your personal structure. But the stability demands on gymnastic rings are extremely high, and it is quite an advanced variation. Doing it on your typical V-bars would be completely fine. If you wanted to do dips in rings but didn't have the strength, a good way to go about slowly improving your strength is to start with bodyweight assisted reps and then progress to eccentric or lowering reps only and slowly open up your range of motion over time as your strength improves. Just be patient with yourself. Don't expect to go from not being able to do a single dip to doing sets of 10 within a few weeks or even a few months. That is literally 1,000% increase, if not more of an increase in your total output and strength. And you wouldn't really expect that from any other exercise, and dips are no different. If you're performing dips in a static station like a machine or on dip bars, I recommend using angled V-bars if you have them available, or offsetting your hand position to be slightly inverted. This accommodates for that natural arm path we were talking about earlier and can go a long way to improving your strength, comfort, and muscle stimulation. The thing that I like about dips is that they do require a high degree of coordination of your entire body. This might actually sound a little counterintuitive to what I've been talking a lot about in other videos, where I tend to bias movements that remove your need to coordinate or brace your body. But it's important to note that having more or less bracing support or stability demands on an exercise doesn't necessarily make it a good or a bad thing. It is simply a feature of the exercise, and how you go about fitting that in with your programming is what makes it a better or a worse choice. Now, while there are more stable options that are easier to execute than a dip for triceps, I like to favor them for the skill and coordination aspect more than anything else, as I personally think it is something that does get neglected in this particular position of a dip motion. Now, the big thing with dips is that it is an advanced exercise that has the potential to take you into an extreme joint position that you're probably not used to. This is often why a lot of people tend to complain of shoulder pain on the exercise or think it's a dangerous movement for their shoulders. Now, I don't think dips are necessarily to blame for this, but I do think that the range of motion used by many people is excessive, as they don't really understand how far they can really control and instead allow gravity to simply pull them lower and lower and lower. The important thing to keep in mind here is that the complete range of motion for a muscle is often different to the complete range of motion for the joint that we're working. A simple tip to find roughly where your controllable active range is to simply perform a dip motion standing in midair just like this, and taking note of how far you're able to get your arm back into extension behind your torso comfortably. Now this here should be roughly the range of motion you achieve on the dip motion, and any lower would be extending beyond your controllable range for your muscles and taking stimulus away from them. Now again, if dips are an exercise that you're not comfortable with, you can get a similar kind of response and the coordination stability demands by incorporating push-up variations and other press variations as well. To help make them a bit more biased towards triceps though, just keep an eye on what your elbow is doing and having your elbow move as far as possible away from wherever the resistance is. So, for example, take a close grip push-up. Tucking the elbows doesn't actually change much for the triceps whatsoever. What we want to do to make it more triceps is to make sure that the movement is performed with more elbow flexion and extension, and that at the end of the movement, the elbow joint has traveled as much as is comfortable away from the resistance or away from your hands. This small change makes a big difference for overall triceps stimulation versus shoulders or chest when you're doing a push-up. But you will find it considerably harder as it becomes a lot more isolated for the triceps. So there you go guys, my 2 favorite exercises for triceps. Hope you guys enjoyed this video and I'll see you guys next time.